Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at how to set up speed sensors within our Link G5 and G4X programming. This is going to be related to wheel speed sensors as well as vehicle speed sensors. You may find something like on a transmission case providing a speed sensor reading to the Link. Now, the reason why we want to bring in speed sensors, specifically wheel speed sensors, is for traction control purposes. We can find that we can detune the engine if we're overpowering the tire on the vehicle, and we need to measure the driven and undriven wheel to determine how much slip we have going on to allow the traction control to work. Now, we may not also want to use it for traction control purposes. If we're talking about launch control, we want to turn off our launch control at a given speed. We can use a speed sensor source to do that. We can also find in things like our idle control, we want to turn off the closed loop and go into open loop as we're driving. For the idle control, we use speed sensor source to define and determine when we want to go from closed to open loop. We also may want to use a speed sensor reading to define the gear detection. So Link knows what gear we're in. We can use that for programming for things like boost by gear or any other kind of runtime value that we might want to program based on gear. So any other table or custom table we want to create, we can do that based on gear. So speed is really important to have coming into the Link. It's really easy to set up. What we're going to do here is take a look at setting up a vehicle speed sensor as well as a wheel speed sensor here for our programming. And then depending on what you're working with, you'll know exactly how to do this and configure the software here. Some little bit confusing things that can go on in the programming. We need to pay attention to those details so the Link understands way it's looking at the speed sensors. Okay, we're going to move from our basics page and let's go across here over to our VSS gear page. Here we have our setup window. We have our wheel speed, individual wheel speeds that we can tell the Link where we're wiring it into for all four wheels. And then we have our general purpose speeds. Now, what we're going to do here in the beginning of the training module is set up a vehicle speed sensor source from a transmission speed. So how we set this calibration window right here, this calibration value, and how we program some of the details varies a little bit from our wheel speeds. We can actually use an Excel spreadsheet calculator to calculate our wheel speeds when we're talking about transmission or rear differential speed. We can't use a wheel speed sensor. We have to use a general purpose speed here. So we're going to learn how to do this first and then talk about the wheel speeds. A little bit different in the way we set these up. Okay, so the first example we're going to go through here is a transmission speed sensor source. So let's assume I have a front-wheel drive Honda engine, and I have a transaxle, and on the transaxle I have my speed sensor source. That's going to be reading off of the ring and pinion on the older Hondas, and I want to go in and set this as my speed source. So I need to go in here and use this general purpose speed to take that transmission speed reading and turn it into a vehicle speed reading. Pretty easy to do this. What we're going to do is go into the label here, and I'm going to call this vehicle speed. You'll label this whatever you'd like. So we'll say vehicle speed here. Under the source, we're going to go ahead and set it to wherever we've wired the signal from the speed sensor coming into the Link. It's always going to be a digital input in most cases. I usually use digital. In this case, I use digital 2 for wiring in the sensor. Now, my particular sensor is a 3-wire sensor. It's a Hall effect sensor. So there's a power ground and then the signal output. Hall effect means it's a 0 to 5 volt pulse. So every time it counts a pulse within the tooth count in the transmission, it'll send that 0 to 5 volt pulse out to the Link. So we're going to go ahead and choose digital input 2. Then we have a couple additional things to worry about here. We have a pull-up resistor, active edge frequency filter, and then calibration value. Now in this case, we're taking a look. The pull-up resistor is going to need to be on if we're talking about a Hall effect sensor. So I have a 3-wire Hall effect sensor. If you have a 2-wire sensor, that's a reluctor style sensor. We don't want the pull-up resistor on to complete the circuit. We only use the pull-up resistor on to complete the circuit when we're talking about a Hall effect sensor. In my case, I have Hall effect, so I'll leave it on. Active edge here, there's either rising or falling. I typically choose falling as my option when I'm talking about a Hall effect. It's more reliable in terms of our edge detection. All this is saying is it's either going to count the 0 to 5 volt pulse or the 5 to 0 volt in terms of the actual pulse. Rising means that we're going from 0 to 5, it'll count that for the pulse, or going from 5 to 0, that's the falling option. Doesn't matter which one you choose realistically, but I choose falling because, again, it's a little bit more reliable in terms of the edge detection. If you're talking about a reluctor style sensor, so 2-wire sensor, it does matter which edge you choose. We talked about how to determine that back in setting up our cam and crank inputs, going through all those tutorials. You're going to be looking at what's the fastest moving edge coming from your speed sensor source. And if the edge falls quicker, that'll be a falling edge. If it rises quicker, it's gonna be a rising edge. So that's pretty easy. You have to use the oscilloscope to determine that within the software, but we should understand that concept. In my case, I have a Hall effect. I'll choose falling right here and click OK. Then we have our frequency filter. Generally speaking, with a Hall effect sensor, we don't have to filter the signal coming in from the speed sensor. If you're noticing after you set this up and you're trying to drive, you're noticing that your speed sensor reading here is kind of erratic. It's moving around a bit, kind of almost glitchy. You're gonna have to apply a filter to it. So keep applying to the next filter. Start with a filter 1, click OK, see how it acts, and you might have to go up in the filters to get your speed sensor reading smooth. One of the filter levels will work. We always want to run the lowest filter possible so there's no latency or sampling delay in the speed sensor reading. I'll leave it at none right now and click OK. Now the calibration value here is something that we need to test, doing a little bit of trial and error and actually driving the vehicle. I recommend to have a GPS source on your phone, and then you drive your vehicle at that particular speed. Let's say it's showing 50 miles per hour on your GPS on your phone. You'll simply come in here and change your calibration number here so that when you're looking at your driving speed here, so there's a driven and driving, you're going to find the driving speed is what we're going to set this at for transmission speed. The driving speed is going to match that GPS speed. So the GPS speed is where you're calibrating against, so that's your known. We're going to be adjusting your calibration number here so your driving speed matches. So we do have to do a little bit of things to set this up. We're going to make sure under the driving wheel speed source, we're going to set this to what we're working with here. So you could technically set any of your wheel speeds to your driving wheel source. In this case, I'm going to set, because I have this transmission speed, general purpose speed 1, click OK. The acceleration.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.